Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Restored to More. You are going to be so blessed by our guests today, Michael and Kristin.
Michael and Kristin Cary are the founders of Living Truth, which focuses on transforming the lives of those struggling with sexual brokenness and restoring the shattered hearts of their partners. They also have material, teachings, and resources to equip parents and leaders on the topics of healthy sexuality and how to prepare children for an over-sexualized culture. Michael and Kristin are pastoral Christian sex addiction specialists through Christian Sex Addiction Specialists International. Welcome, Michael and Kristin. We're so glad to have you guys.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks, Charity and Clinton. Thank you so much for having us.
That is a mouthful. You guys are, I just want to make sure the certification was in there. You guys are definitely specialists. I was like,
Yes.
blah, blah, blah. So
Certified pastoral sex addiction specialist. Yeah. You should see the website. It's really long. Yeah. Big, lots of words.
Lots of credibility for sure. But before we even dive into your guys' credibility and the knowledge and the wisdom that you guys have and you share with your audience on your own podcast, that's incredible. I would love for our audience to get to know you guys a bit. Just can you share with us a quick summary of your guys' story and how you guys got to be where you're at today?
Sure. Yeah. I around age 10 or 11, my cousin introduced me to pornography, and that just catapulted me into learning how to use it to cope with the dysfunctional family that I grew up in, and the challenges that I had with peer pressure and bullies and all that stuff growing up. When I became a Christian, I thought Jesus would take all the desire away to look at porn. And I was on a spiritual high for about 3 months or so, and I thought that it was going to be gone. And then masturbation came back, and then I started looking at porn again. So I took the behavior right into my Christian journey. So it did not go away. He didn't magically take it away. And so when I was 38 years old in the IT industry, after going through a divorce, God showed me the way out. And it was really an all-out surrender where I said, God, I will do whatever you want me to do. I'll read whatever you want me to read. I'll go wherever you want me to go. And the scariest part, I'll tell whoever you want me to tell. So 38 years old, I surrendered, and that started the journey where he showed me the pathway out to freedom. And I started helping guys along the way, and left the IT industry and started in full-time ministry devoted to helping guys become free from this issue.
wow. Michael, thanks for sharing that. I don't know for you, I always tell people it gets easier, but it's never easy. You know, it's like, it's never this thing. It's like, oh, no big deal. You know, and I don't know. I feel like a lot of guys share that same story. They have to start with that surrender piece. And I personally love how it wasn't like I surrendered and then it was gone. Because I think a lot of guys are just like, dang, wish that was my story, you know, versus the surrendering, starting the journey. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Kristin, could you answer the same question? Just what your journey looked like and where you're at and how you get to where you're at today?
I was full-time career ministry after college, and when I was 16 weeks pregnant with my first son was when I found out that my husband at the time was cheating on me with a student in our ministry and was addicted to pornography. And it shattered my world. And so there were a lot of attempts on both of our parts to reconcile, and there were no recovery resources where we lived in southern New Mexico at the time. But we did the best we could, finding a Christian counselor, etc. But ultimately that addiction won, and the marriage was a casualty. So when my son was 11 months old, I moved back to Indiana to be near my family and have their support and start to rebuild my life as a single mom. And that journey, I continued working in the ministry by the skin of my teeth. I originally got fired just for getting a divorce. Wow. But then I had some people fight for me to keep my job. So I was allowed to stay in administrative work only. And that was a painful journey. But in that time, I started having other experiences of influencing and receiving from the Lord and being instead of doing, like you guys were talking about earlier, and started my process of rebuilding my life and started seeing God bring women with their own sexual brokenness or women who'd experienced betrayal into my life. And that became more and more my passion. So fast forward to 2009 when I met Michael, and then we got married in 2000, at the very end of 2010. And we knew God was going to call us to use our brokenness, which is different, but kind of mirrors. And he called us into ministry. We started working in sexual integrity ministry in 2011, and then started our own ministry in 2013.
Wow, so cool. It's amazing how God uses just like what the enemy, that verse of like what the enemy intended for evil, God will use for good. And how God just completely transformed both of you and then was like, okay, now this is going to be your story together. And now looking at all the couples and the individuals that you guys have blessed through persevering and working on your own journey and recovery is so incredible. Can you guys share with us now about your ministry? So what is Living Truth? What do you guys do there? Share with us a little bit about that.
What does it offer people for help that want help? All of that.
Mm-hmm. You want me to go?
Sure.
Okay. So Living Truth has evolved over the years. What we offer now is Men in the Battle and Women in the Battle. These are two different groups, but that have congruent messaging. Men in the Battle for men struggling with unwanted sexual behavior. Women in the Battle providing hope and healing for the betrayed partner. And eventually we're going to start a couples in the battle so that couples, after they do their own work individually for a year, can move into a couples program together. Historically, we've also helped start a women's sexual integrity group, and I really have that on my heart to launch one on Zoom, because it was a local group, to launch one on Zoom in the near future, because I think this is one of the most untouched areas of ministry in the church today is women's sexuality, like unwanted sexual behavior in women. So, but currently with Men in the Battle and Women in the Battle, it is a high emphasis on the small group experience, the power of a small group. So we have peer facilitators that have gone through this personally, that are leading a small group of men and Men in the Battle, women in the battle through it's 2 6-month-long curriculums. So for Men in the Battle, it's the freedom path. For Women in the Battle, it's the healing path. And right now we just launched our first one. So we're halfway through our very first round of this custom curriculum that we've created with a collaboration from a lot of our facilitators and other professionals on all the different topics that you need as a man to achieve freedom from unwanted sexual behavior and more, like way more, like total restoration, transformation to be the person God created you to be. And same thing for the women, but with healing and with hope and restoration.
Wow, that's fantastic. And
we've done lots of other stuff in the past, but that is our main focus now.
Yeah. And I love that. We were talking earlier about off air, just how that's evolved and how you guys have seen, okay, we're doing this, which is awesome. We have to add this to it. Or, how can we help people mature and develop? And I love that, because that's what we're all about. We feel like God doesn't just save us from something. He saves us to something. And that's really what it's all about, is it's not just like, oh, I'm walking in freedom just to be free. I think that verse is mistranslated a lot of times in the Bible too. It's for freedom that Christ has set us free, which means he was always thinking about the outcome. God's outcome focused. And I love that. So I love that you guys are doing that. That's so cool. And I think it's so important.
Yeah. Before the pandemic, we were, and a part of the ministry that I really love too is we were speaking to college students, going to college campuses and speaking at group meetings like Crew and so on. And so we would give our testimony in a way that was teaching and helping them, kind of like how Jesus taught in parable and form. So we teach through story form instead of another lecture. College students don't want that. But and then we offer Q&A, and we offer to meet them one-on-one so that we can help launch them onto their journey of freedom as well. And so it's beautiful to see college students engage in that before they get married and bring this into their marriage, the unhealthy sexuality. So, and we've seen all kinds of really, really neat stories. Thousands of students. I don't even know how many campuses we've spoke at, but yeah, so that's something that I miss. Can't wait for us to be able to get back on that journey as well. So
wow, I wish we had something like that.
You can just see your hearts. I don't know. I feel like your guys' hearts are so like, you're like, we want to help everybody. We want to help the women who have unwanted sexual behavior. We got to help the men. We got to help the women have hope and heal. There's the college students. We got to help premarital. We got to help postmarital. We got to help, you know what I mean? And I guess, we totally get it. We totally get it.
Yeah.
And as you guys know, we have 3 little boys. And so we've had to like focus our efforts in one area because it's so easy to be not overwhelmed by it, but just once you start peeling back or maybe unlocking the doors to brokenness, you realize that this unwanted sexual behavior is everywhere. And even if they aren't the person doing it, they're the person affected by it. And there's so much brokenness in our culture, which you guys talk about, creating stuff to teaching children about the over-sexualized culture that we live in. And I just think, man, like, well, again, we have a 4, 2, and 1-year-old, and it's like we're constantly seeing it. We're seeing it in Disney movies. We're seeing it in things that are, you're like, why is that in there? Like, there's no way, but they're so exposed to so much, Well, can you guys talk to us about, you designed these groups. What I'm curious about is you guys know that our listeners, your listeners on your podcast, there are programs out there, there's solutions out there. What do you guys think you bring to the table that maybe is specific to what you've done? You said the power of a small group. What does that cultivate? What is the goal there that you guys are creating in that system?
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned something about like, what do we bring to the table? I think you're alluding to something different or whatever it is. And, I've seen a lot of different programs out there that are really great. And when God called us to write curriculum, I always felt Jesus saying, do something brand new. There's wonderful programs that are out there already that people are being set free through. So the idea of Men in the Battle for guys 18 and older who struggle or have struggled in the past, some of the differences are that we're not focused on behavior management at all. In other words, behavior management would be, just try and stop doing that. The whole goal is to cease some specific behavior, but we always look much deeper. In Matthew 15:19, where Jesus said, it's out of the heart come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, and adultery being a couple in the list that he offered there. And so we focus in on the heart. It's like open heart surgery. We dive deeper in. The interesting thing about men looking at pornography or going to see a prostitute, it really isn't about sex at all. It's a very, very, very little to do with sex, actually. So many things that are missing from a person's life that they've missed out on growing up, that they, the way that they cope with anxiety and all these things. We go after the heart. We go after a model where we're engaging in how do we unearth that? How do we excavate, all the junk that's in there so that we can have soil that's fertile, and then we start to help them rebuild the man, rebuild them as a believer in Christ, rebuild them into the men that God intended them to be. And so having a peer facilitator who's trained allows us to be able to help these men really apply the curriculum specifically to their lives. So it's and yeah, there's groups out there, 12-step groups and different things where they don't have any leader, and so they all they all get to sit around and talk, and it's very helpful. We find that it's also very helpful to have somebody who's been further down the path and they've experienced freedom. So it's kind of like I've been where you are, and I know the path out, the pathway out. Yeah. So that's kind of some of the keys when it comes to the small group experience. And for guys, interestingly, I love what John Eldredge said in Wild at Heart in his book. He said that what we're really looking for is a healthy, intimate relationship with our fathers, with our brothers, with men, when we're looking at sex with a woman. So it's really interesting when you uncover it. So what they're really longing for is the intimacy that Men in the Battle creates in that small group all along.
So good. Mm-hmm. So cool.
Well, I think it just breeds hope when you're sitting in a group and you know that the person who's leading it has walked through it, because that's like, okay, they know what I've gone through, right? It's validating their pain, and then also it's shining hope, like, okay, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I'm looking at somebody who's made it and is successful, and all of those are such incredible elements added to a group. So awesome. Do they go through a workbook, or is it topical groups? What does that kind of look like?
So it's our custom curriculum.
Cool.
And it's short videos, like under 15-minute long videos,
Cool.
because we're trying to gear towards busy, overwhelmed, likely traumatized people.
Which is everyone anyway.
But especially with our people that are coming to us for help. So it's mostly short videos, some worksheets, and some short articles. And it's released one stage or one module of material at a time. Yeah. And they go through that material, and it's like for example, this week in my women's group, they're starting stage 3 of the 6-stage journey. So they're going to talk about the overview, the video that gives an unpacking of the overview of what we're going to do this stage. And they're also going to talk about loving detachment. And that's, so there's videos and worksheets and all of that they'll discuss their own work that they're doing on that particular topic. And it's sequential. Not that this journey is linear, as you guys know, but we give topics in what we believe is a very helpful order for them to be able to experience healing and restoration. Yeah.
Well, I want to tap into you guys' mindset on a few topics that you're probably going over in those groups, because we get to do this whenever we interview somebody. Like, hey, we're going to find some golden nuggets here. We're going to tap into some wisdom, and then everyone's grateful, and we love doing it because we learn a ton from people like you who are putting on these programs. So, what I've heard you guys talk about is this toxic shame piece and how it's not experienced by only one person. It blew my mind to hear you talk about that, Michael, but then you, Kristin, added on that, and how the shame component for the betrayed is like crazy intense, more intense than and a lot of other things they would experience if they were married to somebody who suffered from different addictions. Can you guys both hit on that and just kind of educate our listeners about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Toxic shame. I like to have two different words, shame and guilt. So guilt is healthy, that leads to repentance, and shame is turning inward, and it's looking at the self, at the person on a very broken level, and as defining myself. Like one man might say, I looked at porn, and I made a huge mistake. I want to get free. Another guy would look at porn and say, I'm such an awful human being. I'm a loser. So the latter is shame, toxic shame. Just one example of that. And really, shame. I love the interview that I did with Jay Stringer. He talked about the story of the shark. One of the shark guys, whatever that was, where he says, everything in the ocean swims away from the great white shark. But so really, if you have a shark attack, you have a shark coming after you, he said, swim toward it. It's like completely counterintuitive. So that's what Jay said we should do with shame, is swim toward it, enter into it, move toward it, expose it, talk about it, because other people don't see you the way that you see yourself through that shame. So, we live our lives through this lens of who we think we are, even though God tells us we're somebody else. We're joint heirs with Christ. We're sons of God. So it's the enemy of our soul causes us to and sets that shame on fire in our hearts, to where that's all that we can see. And we can't see anything else. So moving toward it and exposing it, and that's for so many guys, when they get into a Men in the Battle group, that's the first time that they've ever been able to talk honestly and openly about their behavior. And even still, a lot of them are withholding. They're holding back. They're not telling them everything. But for in the very beginning, I've had so many guys come to me and say, "Thank you so much. This is the first time that I've actually been able to be myself instead of trying to be someone else." So, when we're ashamed of who we think we are, then we have masks and personas that we start to bring out, and we to the point to where guys don't even know who they are any longer. You know, they've pretended to be someone else, and we have different personas that we bring out depending on the kind of people or the group that we're around. And this isn't just, you know, for men or women who struggle with unwanted sexual behavior. This is the human experience. In other words, all human beings have some amounts of shame, and all human beings have put forward this persona.
I was ashamed, and so I hid, you know, way back in Genesis.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's where it started in Genesis 3 and 4. And yeah.
And you guys talk about how I've heard you say on different interviews that the shame doesn't even only come from the behavior that we do, but it can be even developed at like, excuse me, it can be developed like even 18 months of a child who's going through things where they're internalizing this shame that maybe is being passed down from parents. Is that right? Am I saying that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if a parent doesn't love themselves, accept themselves, treasure themselves, take care of themselves. And I know a lot of Christians balk at that, but it's like, did Jesus not say, love your neighbor as you love yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, it's assumed that we will take care of ourselves and love ourselves, but instead we abuse ourselves a lot. So if a parent is not loving themselves, they can't truly pass unconditional love on to their child. And most of us, you know, as children, we pick up on how our parents feel about themselves and internalize that. We also pick up on how our parents feel about each other. So, you know, especially in families where there's an addictive system and the parents are at war with each other, it's not to say that we can't have arguments in front of our kids, but is there repair? Is there acceptance? Is there grace? Is there mercy? Anyways, when all of, you know, when we reject ourselves and we reject our spouse, we actually pass that on to our kids. It can be repaired. It's not hopeless, but.
So when you feel horrible about yourself, it's a lot easier to look at someone else's faults than deal with your own, you know? So yeah, that's there's that book that I've never read called Hurt People, you know, and that's so true. I don't know if I intend on reading it. I'm just saying that's the title of it. It's great advice and to understand this problem. Hurt people really do hurt people.
And Clinton, you had asked about the shame for the partner. And the thing that I see, and I experienced this myself, is, I mean, I went through this pre-trauma model. Trauma model didn't exist. It was all co-addict model.
Yeah.
I was immediately told things like, what aren't you doing? What did you do? Like, have you figured out why you married a man like this? Like, I didn't know that he would do this. I had no idea. We were Christians. We were virgins when we got married. You know, we were in ministry together. I had no idea, but there was a lot of shame put on me as I must have contributed to this problem. And then even now with the trauma model being used in our ministry and so many other wonderful ministries, it's like there's this intuitive, innate question that a woman has when she knows her husband is cheated, and that is, why am I not enough? Even a woman who knows that she's amazing. I think it's part of our bargaining. I think it's part of the grief of like wondering like how, you know, what could I have done differently? And a healthy person will eventually come to realize the 3 C's. I didn't cause it. I can't control it. I can't cure it. This is not on me. But for a while, I think a lot of women absorb some of his shame, and then they also take on some of the, why wasn't I enough for him, that he had to go look elsewhere. Once they understand that it really never was about sex, and it really never, it would be impossible for any one human woman to be enough for the addiction, because it was never about somebody being enough. It was about him being sick. Then she can rid herself of some of that shame.
Wow. And that only comes from doing the personal work, right? That's what you talk about.
Yeah. You guys were just hitting on it briefly, and I kind of want to dive deeper. I would love to ask you, you know, your work helping daughters and young women of addiction are amazing. What issues does a daughter experience when their dad continues to have unwanted sexual behavior?
Oh my gosh. Well, have you heard our latest episode with Taylor? She's a daughter. It was a 2-part series very recently.
Oh.
Okay. You guys, really good because it's her story. And then we're going to release another one in May, another 2-part series with another daughter. These are the 2 daughters that were in our very first Daughters in the Battle meeting for young women who've been impacted by their parents' sexual betrayal. So a lot of toxic shame. And again, because parents are having so much pain and conflict, even from when they're young, even if they don't see it, it's not like dad's, pounding a fifth of vodka and screaming and yelling, but that backdrop of what's going on with his shame over his sexual secrets, it is transmitted in a family. So, but when it comes out that this is what the problem is, when a daughter or a son finds out, there's a tremendous amount of shame because we all identify ourselves as coming from our parents, as being a part of them. Part of becoming a teenager and growing up is learning, no, I am a completely separate person, but we still are drastically influenced by our parents and what they were like and how they treated us and how they treated themselves, how they perceived the world and God. And so these girls, I mean, Taylor's a great example where the first time she found out, she was 16 and she actually went to one extreme of acting out sexually. I think she was like, if my dad is doing this, like, I guess it's okay. I mean, the other extreme was 10 years later when she found out again, and it was way worse, that she shut down completely sexually and shut down completely to the idea of a relationship. Now she's done her own work. So these daughters can go, they can do their own work and they can get help and they can unpack all of this and change and grow and actually become better than they ever were before. But in the beginning, there's a ton of shock. There's a lot of parallels with partners. In fact, back before Daughters in the Battle existed, I had met this young woman, Kristin, whose podcast is coming out in May. And she needed help. She was crashing and burning. Sometimes in an addictive family system, a child is parentified or made into like a surrogate spouse and depended on emotionally by one or both of the parents. And so she had been living in this state of over responsibility and wanting to take care of her mom. Then when her mom was traumatized by dad's sexual betrayal, and it decimated her relationship with her dad. So she had nothing except for, I think she may have had a therapist at that point. She didn't have any other help. And I just said to her, do you want to try coming to Women in the Battle? I didn't know what else to offer her. She benefited from it so tremendously because she felt validated. And part of the power of the group is hearing other people in the group be vulnerable and honest and say things about what they're thinking and how they're feeling that you yourself have thought or felt, but have never voiced out loud or have never really identified. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. Oh my gosh, maybe I'm normal. Maybe this is okay that I'm feeling this way. And maybe I don't have to always stay here. So it is very traumatic for kids when sexual betrayal breaks out in a family, but there is hope for healing. There is hope. They just need a lot of support. And who are they supposed to talk to? I mean, both of these girls were like, I told my friends, some of them were like, they just let me cry with them, but that's about the best they can do. Most people don't even know how to do that.
Yeah, so true.
And that is why it's so important to get your own individual healing so that you can be an example to your kids. You can show them that there's hope, that there's healing, that there's freedom. Clint and I always talk about this. Like if we're not comfortable going deep and talking about our own sexuality, how in the world are we supposed to come alongside the younger generation and help them? We need to be equipped. We need to be prepared so that when they come to us, we don't get awkward, feel shame. It's like, no, we can address it. We can talk about it in a healthy way.
Yeah. You guys both came from, the words you use were that your marriages or Kristin, your marriage was a casualty of sex addiction and that it overran it. And I guess what we deal with, and I'm sure you guys do too, is you have so many couples that come to you for help and they're asking for, how do I handle this? And I would love to pick your guys' brain. How can a wife know that our husband is getting better? I think a lot of wives are like, hey, we're deciding to stick through this, but he's not perfect right now. How do I know he's getting better? How do I know that I should be sticking with this marriage? Could you answer that? It's a big question.
Yeah, I think Well, yes. Something that we learned many, many years ago when we first got started ministry was what that looks like, and we're really grateful. I think it was Richard Blankenship that first taught us openness, brokenness, and humility. Those three are the ingredients of someone, and who has, you know, everything to make it. He's got to have the attitude of surrender that I mentioned earlier. That is extremely important. So, but what does that really look like? Openness, brokenness, and humility really is, you know, if and I tell guys, if your wife asks you to sleep on the couch, the answer is just yes. You know, when, especially in the beginning, I'm talking about when she finds out and she's traumatized, understanding that you've been looking at porn for 30 years and she didn't know about it, or, you know, maybe it was something worse with crossing the flesh line. I tell guys, just do whatever she asks, except if she asks you to kill yourself. You can say no to that for sure. But otherwise, you know, even if it's drastic, say, let me talk to my counselor about that. You know, let me talk to someone else about that. Don't say no immediately, even if it's drastic things like quit your job or whatever it is. But so that's a brokenness and a humility in there. Okay, he may certainly get defensive from time to time. I think that's a natural human reaction to some degree, but the guy who's going to be free is never going to stay there. He's going to circle back around. He's going to say, "I'm so sorry, I got all defensive." You know, you're right. You know, it's all I have to own my behavior 100%. You know, I chose to do this, and I'm so sorry. So he's willing to get help, willing to talk to the people that he needs to talk to. So that's the openness, brokenness, and humility.
Wow.
And then, of course, we say, believe the behavior. Like if he says, "Oh, I love you," or "I want to make this work," but he refuses to go to group or he refuses to get counseling, then don't believe his words, believe his behavior. And one thing that really helps our women know is we expose them to other men in recovery. So we will have a men's panel, for example, where men who've been in recovery come and answer the women's questions. And that's very eye-opening because for some women, they've only seen the closed off, prideful, arrogant, defensive, angry man who is turning everything back on her and gaslighting her. And so she doesn't, but he's so smooth at it and he can cue the tears at just the right time that she doesn't realize what's happening. Yeah. Sometimes when women see men who are recovering, that can be really helpful, and see their posture and their attitude, the softness, the kindness, the gentleness, like Jesus, right? And then also Michael will come in and answer the women's questions. And when he says something like, if you ask him for something reasonable, like, would you sleep on the couch? I feel unsafe. I cannot fall asleep in our bed with you in there because I'm so agitated right now. Then he needs to honor that. And so just having permission, I think for some of these women, having permission to ask for what they need to feel safe, and having a man who's leading, hopefully their husband and other men, say, yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask for. It's validating to women to know, okay, either, yeah, my husband, he might be making a lot of mistakes, but he's in the trajectory of that brokenness, openness, and humility, or not.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to ask a tough question. Maybe you have an answer, maybe you don't. It's okay. But from what we're talking about, she's in recovery, she's healing, she's finding freedom, confidence. He is unwilling to do anything. What do you encourage her to do?
What's the first step?
Does she stay? How long would you encourage her to stay? What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, this is a great question. And I'm going to tell you that one of our greatest values is safety. And so we have a very strong guideline of not giving advice in our groups. We empower women with information so that they can make choices. And so the very first module or stage of our material is all about safety. So we equip them with learning about the power and control wheel and power differentials and the value of a power and control person versus a non-power and control person. We equip them with stuff they need to know to get safe. So for example, we encourage them, if you haven't already had an STD test, this is all in the curriculum side, right? We would encourage you, here's some things you can consider doing for safety, right? So a lot of times what happens is they get that information and they start to wake up and go, oh my gosh, I'm not safe. Like, and you know, when they learn things like believe the behavior, not the words. And I mean, I feel like just telling a woman straight up, you really should leave, is, first of all, it's not my business, right?
Sure.
And it's her business. And second of all, she may not be ready to leave. Third, I'm not God, and I don't know if he is a power and control person and or a narcissist or can't change, or if he's just lagging behind and he's still acting out, but there's going to be a breakthrough. And I can't make that decision for her, but I can empower her with lots of knowledge and information to help her walk in truth, walk in the light, walk with her eyes open, not her head in the sand. So knowledge is power, and she has this knowledge, and then she has the courage and the support of all these women rallying around her, and she sees some of them with similar situations and the decisions they're making, and that challenges her, right? And so even when I used to work one-on-one with women, and so did Michael, we've had to give that up because we don't have.
I worked one-on-one with men, yeah.
That's,
you worked with
I worked with women.
Yeah.
He worked with men. He used to work one-on-one. We've had to give that up because of the time it takes to run all the other programs of our ministry and creating curriculum. Well, even when I worked one-on-one, the only time I would ever say, yeah, let's get you help to leave, is if a woman would straight up ask me, do you think I should leave?
Yeah.
And especially if she's unsafe, or if, let's say, she's not like overtly being emotionally or psychologically abused, but he is just not recovering, and she's got all the knowledge she needs, and she's got her safety plan in place, and she asks me, I'm thinking about divorce, you know, what do you think? I mean, I would be like, I totally support you to do that, you know, but it's so her choice.
Yeah.
It was Nate Larkin who told me 4 out of 5 men won't get help unless they are faced with an ultimatum. And not, I don't encourage women, you need to rush into an ultimatum right away, but through setting boundaries. And they teach about that in Women in the Battle, you know, having boundaries as safety. Through boundaries, I've seen guys start to come around and say, okay, you know, but until she really got to that place where she was willing to set those boundaries, he wasn't going to do his work.
Yeah. So good. And I think that's so true. I know I needed that from Charity. Countless other men say, hey, you know, when my wife said, this is it. And I love what you said, Kristin, because it just sounds like every case is so different. There's not a one size fits all, one answer covers it all. And I love what you're saying is instead of us jumping to the outcome of divorce or not, or should I stay or should I go? You know, it's really it's the question of, let me empower you and let me teach you how to analyze this the right way. Let me help you look towards the light. Let me help you understand the confidence level, find restoration in yourself. And then you're more able to make a healthy decision, not based off of emotion or even an occurrence or one thing happening, but be able to kind of maturely analyze that.
The word we love is clarity. Like, we love to give women clarity for here's what's happening. Like, they watch the teaching on gaslighting, they do the worksheet on gaslighting, and they go, oh my gosh, he's gaslighting me. And then they learn how to opt out of that. And they learn how to identify, this is happening, I'm not going to engage with this. And they start to realize why they've been so confused for so long. And then they can make their decisions out of that clarity.
So good.
That's so powerful. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's going to help a lot of people hearing this in the podcast for sure. Yeah. Well, you know, what I would love to ask you guys is, you know, here's, I don't know if you face this a lot. I would assume you do, couples are like, oh my gosh, we're devastated. I just found out he's looking at pornography. He has an addiction, or he's acting out. He's crossing a flesh line. We need help. Wait, your programs are a year? They're how much? And it's like, okay, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. You just said I would do anything to fix our marriage. And then the money comes up and it's too expensive or it's too long. Everybody that's our age, I'm 30, she's 29. We all want a microwave fix. We want microwave burritos. You know what I'm saying? Everybody wants to pop something in the microwave. 30 seconds later, it's good to go. I think we all want 2 week long to our ultimate body fat fitness. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, that's where we're at as a culture. And so how do you guys counteract that where people are saying, I want a great marriage, and you're sitting here and you're this amazing couple. It's going, look, freedom is possible. Restoration is possible. Reconciliation is possible. You can thrive in your relationship. But the caveat is it's going to take time. It's going to take money. How do you guys assess that with people?
Well, I've asked guys, how long have you been addicted to porn? How long have you been looking at porn? So if you would have asked me, after 20 years, then I would say 10 was what I would have said, because I would have lied. But anyway, so 10. So I would come back to him and say, okay, so so you've been doing this every week for 10 years and you want to just take care of this in 1 month. Is that really realistic? Absolutely not. Do you think 1 year, investing 1 year of your time, do you think investing 6 months every single week is worth it? If that could buy you freedom, or are you willing to take the risk and not do this? Then go ahead and keep doing it for another 10 years, and then sure, all the porn that I looked at was free, but the other aspect as far as the financial is, it fits in the same category. What kind of a price do you really want to pay? Freedom isn't free, right? Freedom always comes with a cost. It's really interesting how much depth there is in the cross itself, and how, freedom for us had to come with a severe price, right? I mean, Jesus died for you. So what is freedom worth to you? Is it worth $100 a month? Well, absolutely. When I was coaching and, my fee was $100, and I said, I told guys, I don't, guys would say, well, I can only afford to come every other week. I would say, well, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I won't. It needs to be at least once a week. And if you need to take money out of your savings, cash it on your 401k, do you realize what your life will be like? So casting a vision of what freedom really feels
how
like.
much a divorce costs?
Yeah, $235. But you can. That's without the child support. But anyway, you're thinking about $100. Is it really worth it to be free? And Clinton, I don't know what you believe about. I totally support Covenant Eyes and the different types of software, the blockers, but that goes back, rewind back to behavior management. I'm talking about the kind of freedom where we don't need that. Where we can, we can take our phones and we just don't look at anything on these devices, So that's the kind of freedom that's to be had. Is it worth the price that you're going to have to pay? So really is their decision, and if they don't, then I feel like they haven't reached that place of surrender that I talked about earlier. When they get there, and that's where I was, it was like, this is a tumor inside of me, and I don't care what needs to happen. If you don't give me anesthesia, I don't care. Just get it out now. I have to get this out of my life. I don't care what the cost is.
Because you were totally willing.
When you reach that, and towards the end where I was coaching guys, those were the only guys that I would coach. Those were the only guys. And they asked, some guys would ask me, what's your success rate of helping guys get free? And I always said it's 100%. 100% of the guys that do 100% of the things I ask them to do and are 100% all in, they get freedom 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But 100% of the guys that don't do 100% of the things I say and aren't 100% all in fail 100% of the time. So it's 100%, whatever way you look at it. You have to. So yeah, help them to see the vision of what that really looks like, because it's just a smokescreen, and usually the guys that say that usually just aren't really ready yet.
Yep.
Now, we have a massive shift that we made in our model, because we started by doing free support groups in local churches.
Mm.
And then eventually we started just asking for like a donation, whatever people wanted to give, like $2 a week or whatever. But the consistency of people actually doing that was rare and low, and the commitment level of people coming through our programs was not high.
Mm.
There were some people that committed themselves, but it was haphazard, and the people could come in at any time and leave whenever. There was no commitment needed. And there were some gifts in that, but there were also some constraints. And when COVID hit, we had to move all of our meetings to Zoom. And then eventually God led us to move everything to Zoom and to build this program that is 6 months long for the first track.
Yeah.
And then you can take the second one if you want to. But we have seen a way higher level of engagement. So while we may have had more bodies pass through the room when it was free and it was open at all times, I think we're going to have a way higher rate of transformation with the consistency and the commitment.
So true.
Love that.
Sign me up. You got me like fired up. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't even have this isn't
Point
my
issue.
right
You're like,
now,
I don't have an issue.
I'm signing up because isn't
You're in. We have a coupon for you guys. Don't worry.
Yeah, I just want to know, is there a coupon? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But isn't that the kind of God that we serve? I mean, we so resonate with what you're talking about. Like freedom is like, God doesn't just say like, yeah, you're going to experience freedom, but have all these blocks forever. You know, it's like, no, when you have experienced total freedom in Christ and done a lot of recovery and healing, then like God doesn't want to live. He doesn't want you to live in bondage. He doesn't want you to still being a slave to programs and your phone. Like he wants you to live in complete freedom. But like you said, freedom comes with a cost. And are you willing to do that work? But it's so worth it when you talk about that. Like, I'm like, yes, why would you not want to have a life like that? You know? So you got me all fired up. We are excited. We love what you guys are doing.
And so true. You had to spend thousands of dollars. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on counseling, recovery, therapy, intensives, groups. I mean, you know what I mean? And there's not one penny of that was not worth it. Like there was not one session that was like, oh, I wish I didn't pay that. And it wasn't that every session was epiphanies and gold nuggets and bombs dropped. It's just the process of healing. It's not that, you know, and so my therapist was like, hey, Clinton, let's look at your budget. Like how much coffee do you buy on a daily basis, right? How much you spend at the gym? How much you spend for subscriptions at Netflix, and how much you spend on eating out? Like, why are you valuing eating out more than your own recovery? And I was like, dang, oh snap. You know what I mean? And I was like, because that's the reality, right? Most couples easily spend $300 to $600 a month on eating out, and then another $400 to $600 on groceries. And so it's like, okay, we can spend $1,000 on food, but we can't prioritize recovery, you know? And so I'm just like, yes and amen to what you guys said, man. And honestly, Michael, when you talked about what that looks like for Jesus to sacrifice his life, there was no price too high that he was unwilling to pay for us, right?
Yeah. And, you know, in the Sermon on the Mount where he talked about, if you looked at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. You know, the very next verse says, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. Or if your right arm causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. And so I don't believe that Jesus really was into self-mutilation, but what he was saying was take it that seriously, you know? And he wasn't even talking about sin of the flesh. He's talking about in the heart. You've committed adultery in your heart. Take this growth, this spiritual growth, this excavation of your heart. Take that seriously.
So good.
Well, guys, how can our listeners get plugged into all that you're doing? Can you please share with us where they can find out about what you guys offer?
Yeah, www.living-truth.org. You can join our mailing list. We have a bi-weekly podcast, and then all of the information about Men in the Battle, Women in the Battle, Couples in the Battle, when that launches, etc. We'll have groups open up for new members again in August.
Cool.
Well, thank you guys. Seriously. Wow. I took so many notes. Oh my gosh. There's so much wisdom and gold, and we learned, and I just know this is going to bless our listeners a lot. So thank you guys so much for being on our podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you guys. It was a joy to be with you.
Take care.